All right, NFL Network, Steve Wyche joins me virtually here inside the TCO studios for a one-on-one. And Steve, before we talk Vikings, you are on the play-by-play this weekend for the upcoming, or the inaugural HBCU Legacy Bowl in New Orleans, which airs on NFL Network at 3 p.m. Central Time. And this is a first-of-its-kind event. Can you describe what it all entails and why this game is so important with, pushing the memo of the NFL?
Yeah, look, it is the inaugural historically Black colleges and university Legacy Bowl. And what it is co-founders Doug Williams and James Harris, two of the first, Black quarterbacks and preeminent quarterbacks in the NFL, founded this bowl to give 100 draft-eligible players from HBCUs an all-star game and week of practices to showcase themselves for NFL scouts, NFL teams, CFL scouts, XFL scouts, because only one player from an HBCU has been drafted over the past 2 years, and that's ridiculous. Seeing the legacy of Shannon Sharp and Michael Strahan and Jerry Rice and so many other hundreds of players from HBCUs who've made the NFL so important. I mean, keep in mind, more than 10% of the Pro Football Hall of Fame came from HBCUs. So this game is being staged, again, to expose some of the NFL teams to the talent that is there and the talent that's been ignored, and hopefully things work out.
Yeah, there's a lot of great talent. I'm from North Carolina, so Winston-Salem State, North Carolina A&T. So understanding, that history and that culture there, that adds great value to what is going to happen this upcoming weekend. And I'm sure this coaching staff and new general manager and new front office for the Vikings will be watching that game also. And speaking of, this new regime here with the Minnesota Vikings, we just announced Kevin O'Connell as the new head coach here. What's your initial reaction to what's going on here in Eagan?
Well, I mean, look, it's kind of a young, refresh. Chris Spielman and Mike Zimmer had a great thing going on for years in Minnesota, but now they decided to refresh things. And, teams have to do that every so often. So you get someone like Kevin O'Connell in, and, I live in Los Angeles. I'm around the Rams a lot. He is highly regarded. He is a former player, right? And that carries, an instant amount of gravitas with current players because you know what they've went through. Now, he's not a play caller. He didn't call the plays with the Rams. That was Sean McVay. But he's the one who conveyed the message to the quarterbacks and to the offense at times of what the game plan is going to be as they went through the week. So he stood in front of a room. Mm-hmm. He does have a presence about him. A big, tall guy has a presence about him. That's important when you're trying to coach grown men and trying to implement game plans and things like that. So we'll see how things work out, but I just think it's going to be a new, fresh voice, an offensive-minded voice, somebody who comes from a system and a scheme where it's not just great offensive play calling, but team-wide communication. That's more paramount than anything to the Rams' success. So Kevin comes from that tree, and again, we'll see how things work out.
Yeah, we know this Vikings team, we've been balanced. We got a guy like Dalvin Cook, you're able to run the ball. But now with Kevin O'Connell, who was with the Rams, they run a lot of 11 personnel, which is one extra receiver on the field, and you take a tight end or a fullback out. What does that mean for this offense that's been top 10 the past 2 years?
Well, I mean, look, you don't know if he's going to do something with a fullback, with a tight end. They'll mix it up. The Rams are a lot of 11 personnel. Maybe that's what they do. But he may say, look, with the Rams, we had all of these wide receivers and a certain type of personnel that worked with 11. With the Vikings, 12 personnel, right, or 21 personnel might be more effective. So I don't think he's necessarily coming in with a one-size-fits-all mentality. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to adjust to the talent, maybe eventually pull it back to 11 personnel. But you are still going to see a run-heavy offense. It is a zone offense. It's the same type of run scheme that they've been running, right? Think 49ers. Think, what the Rams do. They're going to throw the ball when they have to, use the running game to set up the passing game, kind of like what the Vikings have done. Again, probably with a refresher of what they want to do. But as long as Dalvin Cook stays healthy, the Vikings are always going to have a chance because we see them quite a different team when he's on the field as off of it.
Absolutely. And, just with that said, do you see any immediate moves or topics that the Vikings need to address immediately with this new regime?
Well, I mean, look, they've got to tighten some things up. We know that some of the salary cap issues they have, but they've got to get some things together defensively. They've got to be more consistent on offense because, like I just mentioned, when Dalvin Cook is injured or nicked, there tends to be a drop-off in the functionality of the offense. I do think Kirk Cousins is gonna be asked to do what he's been asked to do and nothing more. You know, Cousins and O'Connell apparently have a great relationship, and Cousins was really pushing hard for O'Connell to get the job. So I think that'll be a comfort issue for Kirk Cousins. But again, I don't think Kevin O'Connell's going to come in and tell Cousins he's going to start throwing the ball 35 times a game. Ideally, that number would probably be 28 or less.
That's a good point. You made a great point about the defensive side of the ball. Some of the discrepancies, the stats speak for itself. When addressing this offseason, the defensive side of the ball, how aggressive should the Vikings be in free agency versus the draft?
Well, I think this is a window for them, so I think they do need to be fairly aggressive in free agency. You know, look, if Danielle Hunter's healthy, he's just a monster of a pass rusher, but they've got to get him some help up front. And Kevin O'Connell, again, he's coming from a culture where pressure up front dictates what happens on the back end, but you've got to have a stud at one of those corners, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to have somebody who can play different coverages, who can mix it up some things. So maybe those are some areas, you know, adding maybe not necessarily a high-end, high-market pass rusher, but somebody who's disruptive enough or who can play off of Danielle Hunter a little bit. But they've got to get a corner who can ball up, right? You've got to get someone, if you've got a man up, you know, Adams from Green Bay from time to time, maybe not all the time, that he can at least give his best effort. It's a tough thing to do. Mm-hmm. But it's a very winnable division by the Vikings, especially if Aaron Rodgers decides to leave, right? So to me, there's no reason why the Vikings should not be hyper-aggressive in making every move possible to try to win the division now while Kirk Cousins is in the situation that he's in and while this roster still has some pieces that's in its prime.
So with all that said, what should the Vikings do with the 12th overall selection this year in the 2022 NFL Draft?
Yeah, there's going to be possibly a pass rusher available, whether it's interior or an edge guy, right? There's probably going to be some pretty good corners available, and there's going to be some good offensive linemen available at that spot. Again, nobody's coming fishing for any of these quarterbacks in the top 10. It's a heavy top-loaded talent with defensive front players. So that's where I think they should go to try to build up that defense. Because, again, O'Connell was coming from a culture where pressure up front helps dictate what happens on the back end. And I think that's what they need to do, again, looking at the division first to be able to, you know, upset someone like a Justin Fields. And if Aaron Rodgers comes back, put pressure as much as possible on him to alleviate maybe some of the things on the back end. But if a corner is there, I don't think they would shy away from that as well. Don't know if that great offensive player necessarily is going to be there at 12.
Yeah, well, the Combine is going to be very important this year. But before we get there, we got the HBCU Legacy Bowl this upcoming Saturday, 3 p.m. on NFL Network. Steve Wyche, you're the play-by-play guy on that call. Best of luck with that. We'll see you in the future.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, sir.